Good morning. This is Business Morning coming to you on Channels Television. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. Well, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank will today round off its two-day rate-setting meeting, with the Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele set to announce the decisions later this afternoon. The committee is currently considering, amongst other things, developments in the global and domestic economy to decide whether to tinker with policy variables which it had kept unchanged since July 2016, while dramatic improvements across key macro variables critical to the MPC's decision support to lower rate environment. Recent events in the global space are moderating expectations for a near-term rate cut. The governor will be briefing on the outcome of the meeting by 2 p.m. today. And here on Channels Television, we will bring you that briefing live. And we will have our studio panelists who will be seated by 1:30 to look at the various issues. But joining me now in the studio to preview the MPC decision is an economist and the CEO, the CFG Advisory, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. Good morning, Mr. Adebajo. Good to have you again.
Thank you, in the studio. Good morning.
And it seems every day we keep talking about the same thing. I know that you're one of those who believe that, it's time for the CBN to ease rate. Looking at the macroeconomic variables that they considered in their first meeting of the year. Now, do you still maintain that stance now, particularly with the GDP number we saw yesterday and the recent pressure we've been seeing on the foreign exchange market?
Thank you very much. I think clearly, yes, I think I'm one of the people that believe that a rate cut is not only due but past due. And I'll tell you why it's past due. And I think it has manifested itself in the fact that the vulnerabilities in our economy has been highlighted by the fact that we have lost the growth momentum of our GDP. GDP closed fourth quarter last year at 2.1, and now GDP is 1.96. So that is a major setback for the Nigerian economy in terms of growth prospects. It's also important to note that by 2050, Nigeria will be the third most populous nation in the world. It's important that our population continues to be an asset, not a liability. If our population is growing by 3% per annum and our GDP growth rate cannot catch up with our population growth and exceed it, then we're going to be in trouble. So it is against this backdrop that we have to make our decisions in terms of how do we see the economy going forward in terms of growth. And not only growth, but inclusive growth, because unemployment is also close to 25%. And that is a key economic indicator that the central bank is not looking at. And I think they should make it part of their watch. Fine, the central bank has done a good job in terms of maintaining financial stability. But after 3 years of inflation trajectory on the downward trend, it is clear that by the end of this year, inflation was at 18% 2 years ago, and now we've seen that it's taking us 2 years to get inflation from 18% to about 12.7%. So clearly, by the end of the year, the downward trajectory of inflation is maintained, and we should be able to see inflation close to single digit. But we mustn't wait until the end of the year when we see that drop for us to be able to begin to cut rates, because most of these rates have leading indicators and lagging indicators. So you have to be able to cut rate in anticipation of meeting certain growth targets by the end of the year. The budget has not been passed. We're finding out that the necessary stimulus that is needed from the capital expenditure and all the other programs that the government has said has not been implemented. So growth is slipping once again. And that is where we have the danger. Now,
recently we've seen an aggressive mop-up by the central bank or the foreign exchange market to curtail some of the pressure there and retain foreign capital in the local economy. Now, would it make sense if the central bank is going ahead to do an aggressive mop-up and then ease rate?
Well, we have to take a look at two different things. What are the issues and what is the reason for the mop-up? You're beginning to, we've had a tight monetary situation for the last 2 years because of the pressures of inflation and a bit to be able to tame inflation and retain value in the economy. After a while, we've had the situation with the foreign exchange markets, totally different issue. But the fact is that the markets have already started to respond. And don't forget that 2 years ago, Treasury bills were about a high of 18%. By January, Treasury bill rates were 14%, and today, most of the Treasury bills are like 10%. Even most of the banking lending rates have also come down. Most large corporates now are able to borrow anywhere between 17 and 20%, and non-corporates somewhere above that number. So even though the central bank has not cut the prime lending, the MPR rates, you're finding out that the financial markets have begun to react. So the yield on the Treasury bills are no longer what it used to be. And you can begin to see a bit of disintermediation right now more into the equity markets. And that situation is different. But having said that, the Naira should actually be trading at close to about 280. Because,
but it's not.
Yes, it's not. And those are sort of distortions because you have multiple exchange rates. And if you don't have that conversions into the single rate, that is what is causing the pressure on the foreign exchange markets.
And how do you think the central bank can actually achieve the conversion? Because this multiple exchange rates seem to be a very big issue that a lot of people are talking about.
Yes, I mean, if you have multiple rates, then you create confusion in the markets, and then you present arbitrage opportunities for institutional arbitrage, which does not help any market in itself. The reserves are close to $50 billion. And the argument I've always had in the Nigerian economy is that anytime the reserves are low and the oil prices are down, the Naira devalues. So what happens now that the oil prices have rebounded and our reserves are at an all-time high? So clearly, from my own calculations, our economy should be able to support the Naira anywhere between 250 to 280 right now, if you have a dynamic, market-driven, transparent exchange system.